All right. Welcome to the Post-Gazette Sports Channel live feed. Live. I don't even know if we have a name for this show yet, but it doesn't really matter. I'm Paul Zeise, obviously, sports columnist here at the Post-Gazette. And, of course, the number one topic today, another receiver was traded, and it wasn't somebody that was traded to the Steelers. And so when you look at the overall picture, it's something we've talked about for a long, long time, which is the Steelers seemingly have not had a really good plan or not figured out how to replace Deontay Johnson when they traded him. And I think that is one of the things that has become sort of a recurring theme. Obviously, there was the Brandon Ayuk trade, and today it was DeAndre Hopkins who was traded. And not only was he traded to a team that probably most people said this gives them an embarrassment of riches in many ways. And that, of course, would be the best team in the league, the Chiefs. And I think that's the biggest thing. You look at the Chiefs and you say they understood that they had a hole at receiver, and they went out and made a move. Now, I have no idea. And reading, everyone that covers the Steelers, and believe me, in this town, there's about 751 people who are either covering the Steelers or claim they cover the Steelers, or at the very least, they watch film and claim they are experts on the Steelers. But no matter what, I have yet to read anybody who has said that the Steelers were in on DeAndre Hopkins, or it was close, or it was something that was going to happen, or it was imminent, like the Ayuk stuff. But this is now, if my math is correct, the fourth sort of prominent receiver that's been traded from one team to another. And the Steelers haven't gotten any pieces of it. And I would tell you, I think that this team is really close. I don't know how close, but I do know that this is one of the areas where they need absolutely to have somebody that's better than what they have. I mean, all the joy and everything else that we saw about Sunday night's game against the Jets, the reality is still every receiver not named George Pickens caught a total of 3 passes. And one of them was just basically one of these plays where it sort of broke down, and Calvin Austin was wide open in the middle of the field. In other words, it wasn't really necessarily a play that was all that spectacular. There was a touchdown for Van Jefferson, which was another one that was schemed, and I guess you could argue that, well, he did catch a touchdown, so that's good. But to me, I look at this team and I say, if they're really going to get where they want to go, if they're really going to be able to beat some of these teams with these high-powered offenses in the playoffs, they still need to add a receiver. The problem I have at this point, and I would tell you this is a problem, is that I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, they're going to make a deal for somebody who really isn't that much better than the guys they have. Like, if you're gonna go make a deal, go get somebody that is better than what you have. Now, I know that there's a lot of smoke, or whatever you want to call it, around the Cooper Kupp stuff, but my gut is sort of in the same place it was with the Brandon Ayuk stuff. If it was going to happen, why hasn't it happened already? And what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for, after they play the Giants this week, then they have a bye week, and then they can bring somebody in, and, I don't get that. I don't understand it. Do you want to get better now? Do you want to be a team that's really rolling on all your cylinders? I don't know. What are you waiting for? To me, the other part of it is I've looked at all of the compensations for these guys in these trades. They're not really costing a whole lot. Teams aren't giving up a ton for these trades to make them happen. So, I'm not saying that the Kansas City Chiefs all of a sudden now, boy, they won the Super Bowl. I mean, my thoughts were, you have to beat Patrick Mahomes. No matter what, you got to beat him. So I don't care who he's got with him. When the playoffs begin, the Chiefs are the favorite as long as he's healthy. But giving him another weapon, to me, if you're looking at it and you're the rest of the AFC, you've got to figure it out. Here's the other thing. Did you happen to watch the Ravens the other night? Yeah, I know they had a couple of poor performances early in the season. But if you watch the Ravens on what was it, Monday night, and you haven't come to the conclusion yet that they are going to legitimately be a real threat in the AFC, I'm not sure what you're watching. Lamar Jackson, to me, looks like he's taken some more strides as a passer. He, obviously Derrick Henry, to me, I don't know. He looks like he's 5 years younger than he actually is. I thought one of the most interesting things about Derrick Henry on Monday night, if you follow social media throughout the games, there were a lot of people in the first half that were basically saying, what's wrong with this guy? He's not running. He's not getting fantasy points for us. And then he ran for I forget what it was, 180 yards or something like that. And he actually had a receiving touchdown. He's really good still. And so my point is, those are the teams that you should be worrying about. I hate to say this because some people then will say, well, you're a hater and you're just negative and you're not going to give them credit. I give them credit for blowing out the Jets. Key word there to me is the Jets. You beat the Jets. You beat the Jets. And I'll be honest with you, until Monday when Tampa lost both of their receivers to injuries. Now, Mike Evans apparently is going to be back at some point, but losing him and Godwin, I would maybe say now that I favor the Falcons in that division. And the reason that's significant to me is because the Falcons might be the only playoff team the Steelers have actually beaten. That's something that you got to look at. And if you're going to be objective and you're going to take a look at what they're accomplishing, it's sort of what we knew they were going to do early in the season. They were going to play a lot of bad teams. Chargers look to me like they're kind of the same team that they've been. I think they're better coached under Jim Harbaugh, but I think their offensive line is still bad. If you look at what they have around their quarterback, who has played better this year, obviously Harbaugh has had an influence on him, but Justin Herbert, it's like he's like a man on an island with that team. So, the Steelers beat the Chargers. They beat the Broncos, who, Sean Payton is, the genius of all geniuses or whatever we're supposed to believe. But guess what? The Broncos are going to be 8-9, 9-8. They still have Drew, what's his name? I'm sorry, Bo Nix, Bo Nix is their starting quarter. I almost said Drew Lock there. It's one of those things where I look at this and I just say basically that I don't understand. Just don't understand. If you look at the Steelers' schedule, how anyone could come to the conclusion that it definitively means they're going to be this team that's really in it until the end. Maybe they are, but those aren't the teams you're beating. Those aren't the teams you have to keep up with. To me, I look at the Bills. And, the Bills are interesting because they're inconsistent, they're up and down, but when they're at their best, when they're really good, and quite frankly, it's 100%, almost 100% about their quarterback. If he's playing good and he's in a good zone and he's in a good headspace and he's rolling, man, he's might be the best guy in the league. But you've got three teams, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, that you have to measure yourself against. Those are the teams you have to beat if you want to get to the Super Bowl. And so while it's nice they've been able to do what they've done, and I'm not taking a single thing away from them, so don't give me, the fact that I'm trying to discredit them or discount what they've done. I'm going to tell you this. You have to measure yourself against the best. And if the Steelers are truly going to go and they're going to have a chance to play against those teams and beat them, they need another receiver. They need to get better at that position. So, there's some people that are poo-pooing this idea that they need another receiver. There are some people that are ridiculing people like me who say they need another receiver. But you know what? It doesn't change the fact that, they need another receiver. Whether it's, if it's Cooper Kupp, obviously that's a guy that adds a lot. The only concern with him is, how healthy is he and how healthy is he going to stay? Mike Williams doesn't do a ton for me, but I guess he would be an upgrade over what they have. We going back to Cortland Sutton, who was another guy that they talked about. I look at him And I say the Broncos are 4-3 now, I think, or whatever. They're right back in the thick of things. Are they really going to have a fire sale? I just don't think so. So it comes down to me to this. We call him the con artist and Omar Khan, and we've given him all this praise and credit and everything else for, compiling what looks to be a pretty good team. I think he's added well. I wrote about it earlier this week. The linebacking group looks tremendous. There's depth on defense. The defensive backs are good. I get it. But if they don't add at receiver, it's the same thing I've said a long time, and I'll continue to say it. And that is, if they don't add at receiver, I just don't think that they're going to be good enough to beat the teams they've got to beat once they get to the playoffs. I mean, another team that we're not talking about is the Houston Texans. They're a hard team to really get a gauge on. And I think they're good, but I just don't know. But that's the kind of team, if you get them in a playoff game, who knows? I mean, the Steelers lost to the Colts, for God's sakes. To me, everything is falling into place for them. The offensive line is getting a little healthier. I think they're going to get, all of their pieces except for Troy Fontenot back. Once they get that back, I think that'll help. It looks to me like they're running the ball better. Offensively, they're more efficient. They don't make a ton of mistakes. They still get some holding calls and whatnot, but they haven't turned the ball over. So, yeah, that's a formula for them to have success. But is that going to be enough when you're playing Patrick Mahomes? I mean, at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes is legitimately become that guy. And what I mean by that is, there used to be this back, I'm old. So back in the 90s, we used to have this little saying, or whatever you want to call it. Who's the best backcourt in the NBA? Michael Jordan and whoever he's playing with. In other words, he's that good. And it's the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. Who is the guy? Patrick Mahomes. You got to beat him. Josh Allen, to me, if he's playing really well, you got to beat him. And from what I've seen from Lamar Jackson this year and the addition of Derrick Henry, you got to beat them. I just don't know if the Steelers are equipped to beat them. By the way, the game is always at Archie's on Cars. We'd like to thank Archie's, by the way, for being our sponsor. Archie's is the place in the South Side. The game is always on at Archie's on Carson, Pittsburgh's best place for food, drinks, and sports. Open Saturdays for the game, 12 to 2 a.m. Be sure to check their daily drink specials and, of course, stop in for 80-cent wings Monday night through Thursday. Tell them I sent you. And Mondays, I'm usually there watching Monday Night Football. So if you come down on Mondays for 80-cent wings, say hello to me too, and we'll enjoy the game together. Sunday, of course, the big story was Russell Wilson. Once again, I'm going to fall into that category where people are probably going to accuse me of being a hater and all this other stuff. I'm not. I like Russell Wilson. I think he's a good dude. I think he's probably still a pretty good quarterback. But I think if you're objective about what he did on Sunday night, let's just say he got some really fortunate bounces his way. He got some really fortunate things to happen for him. I still have to see him throw deep balls out there in front of his receivers. I have to see that his arm strength is really still what it used to be before I'm completely sold on, okay, he's going to take the Steelers to the next level. The throw to Pickens, the first deep throw he unleashed, it was short, it was underthrown. Pickens made an incredible play to catch it. He had a play to Pat Freiermuth where Freiermuth made a really good adjustment. And I was kind of like, boy, it took him a lot of energy to throw it out there that far. I think that the Jets also got caught in some bad coverages, and Russell Wilson had some guys wide open to throw to. That's not to take away anything that he did. But I think one of the things you need to understand is I am not 100% sold yet that he's going to be this guy that takes them to the next level. I think he passes. Obviously, he's a better thrower than Justin Fields. I liked what I saw, actually, when he threw the ball a couple of times, he was under duress, and he made a couple of really nice throws, underneath routes, but still he got the ball out to places in space where they were, whoever caught it was able to make something happen with it, as opposed to a sack or an incompletion or whatever. But I got to see more. And I think I got to see more because I saw, I mean, again, people that like analytics, and I don't, but they have something where they call it kind of like the luck factor or something in baseball, for instance. If a guy hits the ball and it just so happens he's hitting it hard, but he's hitting it right at people, there's a little luck factor. They say, well, he's been unlucky. It'll sort of regress, and come back the other way. I got to see Russell Wilson do it week after week after week after week. Not saying he can't. Not saying he can't. But I got to see it every week. He clearly throws the ball better than Justin Fields. What I like with Justin Fields is when plays break down, Justin Fields has the ability to make something out of nothing. And I fear that there are going to be some plays where, Russell Wilson's actually going to get hit. He's not going to be able to get the ball out. One of the things that's his MO has been, he takes a lot of sacks. So, for now, obviously Mike Tomlin made the right choice, but here's my question to you. All of you out here want to say, well, Mike Tomlin's a genius. He's making the right choice, and all of you, and that's why, and what did he say from the podium? Something like, yeah, that's why I get paid a lot of money, or well, that's why I'm well compensated, or whatever he said, basically saying, yeah, I make decisions like that. Here's what I'm going to ask you. If Justin Fields played against the Jets, would the Steelers have lost necessarily? I don't know if you know the answer to that. Because to me, the Jets, and I'll be kind, the Jets stink. And I've heard people say, well, this is a 10-11 win team with Aaron Rodgers. Have you watched Aaron Rodgers play? I don't want to say he's done, but he looks like a guy who's pretty close to done. And I'll tell you when the game was over, and this is the problem with a team like the Jets, who are used to losing, and they have an interim coach, meaning they have a substitute teacher who they know is not going to be around next year. As soon as he threw that interception right before the half, the game was over. You could see it almost deflated the Jets, like, here we go again. And then right after the half, they had an opportunity. They were moving the ball a little bit. He hits a guy right in the chest, and it bounces off his chest into Beanie Bishop's hands, and then he runs it all the way back to the 1-yard line. That's when the game was over. So, I mean, I think it's nice what Russell Wilson has done, and he's did, but this was still a game that was primarily won by the defense in many ways. And they played against a team that usually is going to fold when things go wrong. This week they play the Giants. I would expect them just to annihilate the Giants because the Giants stink too. And it's good. Compile as many wins as you can. But I would be very, very careful with this stuff about how, well, this vindicates Mike Tomlin. It's one game. And that's what I'll tell you. And I don't know that there's any evidence that suggests, at least not to me, there's no evidence that suggests they wouldn't have won the game with Justin Fields as well. Because the one thing Justin Fields doesn't do, he hasn't thrown interceptions, really. He hasn't thrown any or hasn't thrown many at all. He doesn't turn it over. They've proven they run the football really pretty well with him. He adds another dimension in the run game. And to win this game, it would have only required 16 points. And so maybe with Justin Fields, they don't score, 32 or 35 or 38 or whatever it was. Maybe they don't score that. But I have a hard time believing that they wouldn't have won the game. And, maybe, who knows, maybe they would have won it very similarly. Because like I said, it felt to me like the Jets quit. After the second interception, it felt to me like the Jets were just sort of done. And I don't say that to take anything away from the Steelers. The Steelers took their spirit. They took their heart right out of their chest. They didn't want to play anymore. That's sort of the MO of a losing team. And the Jets are a losing team. I had to laugh. I have a buddy who's a huge Jets fan. He's from New York City and everything else. And at halftime, I ran down to, where because he sits in the luxury, he's got money. He's unlike all the rest of us. He's actually got a lot of money and he sits in the luxury. So I ran down, said hello to him, and he said, boy, I could tell you, I could feel the Jets. This is it. This is the Jets team we're waiting for. They looked really good in that first half. One mistake. That's it. So I guess if you're a Jets fan, it's probably similar to being a Pirates fan where you're just eternally optimistic. But the bottom line is they stink. And so the Steelers did what you're supposed to do to bad teams, which is you blow them out of the gym. And so I'm not taking away anything from the Steelers. I'm just saying slow down a little bit with all of the Super Bowl talk. Slow down a little bit with all of the Mike Tomlin was vindicated talk. Slow down a little bit with this talk that somehow Russell Wilson's been revived. Let's wait a few weeks. Let's wait till, I'll tell you a great example is they play the Giants and then they have a bye week, but then they play the Redskins, not the Redskins, the Commanders. Have you watched them play? Now, I know their quarterback's dinged up a little bit, but I have to believe 3 weeks from now he'll be okay. Let's see if the Steelers can go toe-to-toe with them because that team scores a lot of points. That's, to me, when I'll be able to start making a real judgment about where this team actually is. And I often say that the season is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I know that the way we cover it and the way that we talk about it, and I do other media too and whatever, I get it. But one of the things that people always say about me is I'm just a very practical person. I'm practical, I'm objective, I'm realistic. I'm not emotional about things like this. So to me, I look at Justin Fields and I say, maybe if he plays, they probably win just as easily. That's just me. I feel like we'll see what happens. And then I'll make a judgment about Russell Wilson. But I said before the game, Justin Fields really hadn't done anything to lose his job, and I still believe that. He hadn't really done anything to lose his job. But I have no problem. If you want to give Russell Wilson a shot, go ahead. Now you're going to ride it, and let's see what happens. I'm assuming he'll have another nice night, was it Monday night? Because the Giants are garbage. They're bad. They're a bad football team. And the Steelers, especially in primetime at home, usually they pound bad football teams. And that's really where we're at with that. I mean, I just feel like there's way too many people jumping the gun. There's way too many people that want to make a definitive statement one way or the other. All I'm going to tell you is that I have to see more from Russell Wilson. I have to see more from the Steelers offense before I'm ready to say where I think they fit in the AFC. I mean, right now, to me, they look like a playoff team. They were a playoff team last year with Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and Mitch Trubisky playing quarterback. So they should be a playoff team. So I feel like that's really, in my mind, what I would take away from Monday night's or Sunday night's game is that I think that the Steelers, clearly have some really good elements. The defense, real quickly on the defense, I feel like their defense is going to have a chance to be that elite unit we thought they might be. But as I wrote the other day, not just because they've got stars, but because all of the depth players seem to be really getting the job done and getting better, and the younger guys are getting better. I mean, the poster child for that to me is Peyton Wilson, who led them in tackles the other night. I mean, he was that guy, really. And, I don't know where, he's going to fit long-term, but it looks to me like he's going to be a guy who is going to be an inside linebacker for the Steelers for a long, long time. So all those young guys getting better, that's been good. So has the idea that they have depth on defense. And really, I mean, that's what I would take away from Sunday's game. Russell Wilson will start again. Let's see what he does, Monday night. If he is clearly what we think he is based on one game, then he'll have a really big night against the Giants. But again, I need to see it a few times before I'm jumping on this bandwagon. Before I'm basically saying that We are ready to crown the Steelers anything more than just sort of a playoff team. They fit where they fit. But if you look at their schedule, like I said, it's entirely possible they have yet to beat a playoff team. The Falcons, to me, they could be a playoff team now because, Tampa has obviously lost some really key players, and that could change things. But even that, I don't know that the Falcons are a team that's going to run away with the AFC South. I could see very easily that division, the NFC South, I could see very easily that division going down to the wire in the last week of the season, all these teams scrambling to try and win that division. So we'll see what happens with them. This is a live stream, by the way, sort of like what we do after the Steeler game. So you can always interact with me, and there's a chat feature that you can always interact with me if you got questions, if you want comments. We welcome that. We'll see what happens. But switching gears. I've often said this when I talk about the Penguins, and I feel like I'm very repetitive, and probably because I am. One of the worst cliches out there is that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over and over again and expecting different results. I can't understand how people that are paid, well compensated, by the way, to use that phrase again, to make personnel decisions, how any of them thought that Tristan Jarry was going to be anything different than he's been. What were you watching? I'm not even a hockey expert. I watch all the games. I try and get to home games as much as I can. I sometimes go in the locker room to learn. I talk to guys like Venzel or a guy like Mark Madden who really knows hockey. I try and learn as much as I can learn. So I'm not by any means an expert, but I can tell you by watching this guy for as long as he's been around. He is not a franchise starting goalie for any team that's serious about going somewhere and doing something special. But courtesy of signing a long-term deal that made no sense at the time, and this ain't second guessing, you're basically stuck with him being one of your two goalies. Unless you can hoodwink somebody that's so desperate for a goalie, you get him to trade. But you've basically got a career journeyman kind of guy in Nedeljkovic. I hate trying to say that guy's name. Let's just call him Ned from now on. A career journeyman type guy. You've got Jarry, who is a guy who's just basically not good enough. And you've got a rookie. And we've seen, that rookie has played a little bit, and guess what? At times he's looked good, and other times he's gotten lit up like a Christmas tree, which is what happens to most rookies. So we could start there with the Penguins, which really that's the discussion. What are you thinking? What were they thinking? I said many times, and I've said it again. My preseason prediction for the Penguins, they're going to do the same thing they've done the last 3 or 4 years. They're going to be inconsistent. They're going to give up leads far too often. They're going to lose games because they can't protect leads. They're going to lose games because their goaltending is not good enough. And at the end of the year, they're going to be somewhere right around that area where they're going to be either the 7th seed to the 10th seed. And obviously the 9th or 10th seed is you just missed the playoffs. So my point is, I watched them, was it last night against Calgary? Once again, couldn't protect the lead. It's the same thing over and over and over again, and it's because their goalie situation is not good enough. Doesn't matter which one of these 3 guys you play. It's not good enough. And what's going to happen with Jarry? I'll tell you what's going to happen with Jarry. He'll have a stretch where he looks really good. And everybody says, we see, this is why Mike Sullivan and Cal Dubas, that's why they get the big bucks. So what? It's small sample sizes. The body of work overall is not going to be good enough. Period. And you didn't really leave yourself an out either. When you re-sign Ned, you didn't leave yourself an out because you basically said Jari has to be our guy because we have a rookie and we have a journeyman. That's our other options. And so to me, it's one of those things where I just say they got what they deserved. And they're getting what they deserved. And I can't work up any outrage about the fact that, well, they thought they had their guy in Jari. Nobody thought that except for them. Nobody. Even some of the biggest homers in this town. Oh, and believe me, there's Penguin homers, there's Steeler homers, even some of the biggest homers in this town had a hard time justifying that Jari contract. And now look where they're at. And so we'll see. They're still on the West Coast. It's a long stretch for them on the West Coast. But to me, I think that if you look at the big picture, it's the same problem it's been. And that's the goalie position is not good enough. They've got some things to work out with their defensemen and stuff, but it's early. That's going to happen. I think, again, fundamentally, they'll be an okay team. You got enough star power at the top of your roster that's going to drag this team close to the playoffs. But other than that, your goalie situation's not good enough. This is, as I said before, a 7 to 10 seed type of team. It's a matter of, can their stars still overcome what they're lacking at goalie? Anyway, believe it or not, Pitt has a huge game on Thursday night in football. Pitt is one of, I don't know, eight teams left that are undefeated in Division I football. And they play against Syracuse. And let me just say this. And this is probably going to annoy some people, but I don't care. You know who Pitt's biggest rival is now? Syracuse. Not West Virginia. Not Penn State. Syracuse. Now, it could turn back into West Virginia if they continue to sign these deals where they play nonstop every single year. But if they take another 6 or 8 year or 10-year hiatus from that, Syracuse is the team that you play every year. They've been designated your rival sort of by the ACC, both in basketball and in football. And I think that Syracuse finally has the right guy at coach, a guy who understands NIL for sure, a guy with roots at Georgia, a guy who saw, Kirby Smart do it up close and personal. He seems like someone who is a really good recruiter. He's a really good guy that's connected with his players. They play sort of a brand of football that's going to give them a chance to win. They're 5-1. And you know what? Much like Pitt, they went out and got a quarterback in the offseason, and that usually means a lot if you get the right guy, and they clearly got the right guy for the job. So for Pitt, to me, first of all, I look at Penn State, and I say, Pitt fans need to give this thing off. They don't play hardly ever in basketball. I mean, when was they probably played what? Maybe twice in the last 15 years in basketball, if that. I know the women's teams still play here and there, but for the most part, they don't play each other. They play in some of the smaller sports here and there, but Pitt football and Penn State football since 2000. What have they played? A total of 4 games, I think? Adam, jump on, Adam. Can you hear me? Are you in there, Adam, somewhere?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Penn State and Pitt have played, 4 times, right? There hasn't been a game since they had those 4 games in a row, right?
No, there's not, and there will not be for a while here.
Right. They're not even signed to play them again. So to me, I mean, I'll ask your opinion because you're a big college guy, Adam. Shouldn't Syracuse, who they've played continuously nonstop since like about 1985 or something, shouldn't that be their rival now?
Yeah, I think it's trending in that direction. I think North Carolina is a team that they're starting to have some history with some of these teams, Paul. You think about you're always going to have some level of a rivalry in terms of the fans. Pitt and Penn State are next to each other. The fans interact at work every day. I don't think you're ever going to lose, that element of the rivalry. But I do think the way Penn State kind of handled Pitt in those last three games of that 4-game series from 2016 to 2019, I think it took some of the steam out of because you remember Pitt won the last game of that last series. Shortly,
Right.
That last game was in 2000. Pitt won 12-0. Rod Rutherford ran wild at Three Rivers Stadium, and Pitt fans taunted Penn State fans with that for what? That was 16 years before they played again. And I think that there was that undercurrent of, Penn State might be the better program, but Pitt got the last one. I think Penn State kind of killed that in Pitt fans. I'm not saying in Penn State fans' eyes. I think some Pitt fans said, all right, we've had enough of this. And they've it seems like there's been more focus on the ACC. And I think, winning the ACC championship game 2 years ago, going to a major bowl game, kind of striking out on their own in terms of an identity type of thing. I think that was pretty big for reframing that fan base's view of the series. So that's what I'd say. I'd say it's becoming less of a rivalry, not because Penn State doesn't view it that way, although it doesn't. But I think Pitt fans are also evolving away from Penn State and toward some of these ACC teams, especially as they've I think Pitt fans know that they can compete in this conference now. And how long this conference will be together, what college football is going to look like in 5 years, I don't know. But right now, Pitt's 6-0. They won the championship 3 years ago. And I think that gives them, more focus on what's around them rather than what's not on the schedule.
Well, I think one of the things is, Adam, if you were born in, like, say, 1998, okay, so you would be, 26 years old now, right? For the most part, you've seen Pitt, Penn State, games that you can remember. You've seen 4 of them. I mean, you could probably 97. You're 29 years old, right? Your first 3 years on the planet. You know what I mean? You probably don't remember those games very well. Quite frankly, in 98 and 99, Pitt was awful anyway. So, really, at the end of the day, let's say we're born in 1997. You're 27, 28 years old. If this thing doesn't get signed where they don't play for the next decade, which it doesn't look like they're going to play for the next decade, right? Say they're not going to play again, Adam, until, 2024? Let's say they don't play again until 2036. We're talking about people that are 38, 39 years old that have almost no real, feel for what that rivalry was when they used to play every single year. And when, from the, 75 to like 85, when every game really matters, you know what I mean? Nobody, they don't have that vantage point. The people at Pitt, the hardcore Pitters that hate Penn State, most of them are old or older. So to me, it's hard to have a rivalry if you never play each other. And they never play in basketball. Like, I've often thought that was a game that they should play. That's an easy game to play, but Pitt doesn't play Duquesne either, and they don't play Robert Morris either. So,
well, they did do it for a couple of years there, Paul. I don't know if you remember, they played a Pitt-Penn State basketball game in Brooklyn because they were both trying to get games in the New York area to kind of reestablish that pipeline. It was kind of like a weird alliance between the two to all right, well, we gotta get a game near these recruits. Why don't we just do it together? Because we're both kind of on islands talent wise. So they did do that for a few years, but it feels like Jeff Capel's moved the program not just away from Penn State, but like you mentioned, Duquesne, and he just seems to have a different scheduling philosophy. So as long as he's the coach, I don't see that series coming back, especially because they don't even have that ACC Big Ten Challenge anymore, right? It's the ACC. Do they play the SEC now? Something like that.
Yeah, I'm just saying. You know what I mean? We got this guy Dave who's already angry at me again. I'm just now seeing these comments. I had it on the wrong page, so I apologize to people that have commented. I'll be better at answering comment. Dave, I got to respond to him because he's going on and on about how, there were X amount of passes that were completed by, you were wrong. You said 3 passes. I said 3 passes by receivers, not named George Pickens.
Yes.
Is Connor Hayward?
We looked that up.
Connor Hayward a receiver? Is Connor Hayward a receiver? Is Najee Harris a receiver? Is Freiermuth, is he a receiver? No. I said by receivers, Dave. Anyway, I'm just saying, I look at this thing with Pitt and I just say basically Pitt is 6-0. And quite frankly, Syracuse is good. And what's his name? Cal McCord obviously was good at is obviously a really good player and good quarterback. I kind of expect Pitt to be able to win this game. But to me, then you go the next couple of weeks after that, and they've got SMU, Clemson, and Louisville with a game against Virginia, who, Virginia's not great, but they're not horrible either. Who would have thought that Pitt versus SMU is a game they're talking about if Pitt and SMU, I don't even know if SMU plays this week, but if Pitt wins this week, let's see if SMU plays this week. SMU plays, let's look at this real quick. They play at Duke. Adam, do you realize that there is discussions here that if SMU beats Duke and Pitt beats Syracuse, ESPN College Game Day could actually be in Dallas for the SMU game. And I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody at all that had that on their calendar, right?
Is that a rematch of a BBVA Compass Bowl of yore? Remember when Pitt went there like 3 or 4 years in a row? I think they played SMU one of those years. What'd you say?
I think they did. I think June Jones was the coach. If I'm not mistaken, June Jones was the coach. And I think that was the year that let me think about this. So the Kentucky year was the year that Wani was fired. So that was Phil Bennett was the interim coach for that game. Because they went there, if you remember, 3 years in a row, I got to go to Birmingham for the BBVA Bowl. And mostly because the Big East was mad at Pitt because Pitt was losing. So they said, screw you, this is where we're sending you. They played Kentucky the one year. But when they played SMU, that might have been the year that Todd Graham left. And he took, Mike Norvell left with him. And they basically had that guy. He was a high school coach who was on their staff. He was a high school coach from Texas called Todd Dodge. Actually had to be the offensive coordinator. And Keith Patterson, who was their defensive coordinator, great dude, good defensive coach. He had no idea what he was doing. They looked like a complete hot mess. But it's also a rematch. Was it 1983 or 82 or whatever, 84, one of those years? When SMU went undefeated and Penn State won the national title. So it would have been, 82, 83, something like that? Remember, SMU went undefeated, but they had a tie. The last week of the season, they tied, I want to say Auburn or LSU or one of those SEC schools. And Penn State jumped them in the pool. So even though Penn State had a loss, Penn State ended up beating whoever they beat in like the Sugar Bowl or something, and they won the national title. But SMU played Dan Marino and Pitt. It was Eric Dickerson against Dan Marino. And it was a really always scintillating, exciting 7-3 game.
So really, it's a great ACC rivalry if you think about it.
So there's history with SMU and Pitt. But, I do think, well, the other, as an aside, I'm sure I'll get into this a lot more next week when, leading up to the SMU game. If you watch that 30 for 30 on SMU, okay, everything they were doing back then is legal now. In fact, SMU is a team who basically told the ACC, listen, you let us join, we won't even take any of your TV money for like a decade, and our oil and gas guys will just fund us. I mean, they got the death penalty for doing basically the same thing, didn't they? So anyway, at the end of the day, I think that's always amusing to me. But back to Pitt, I think one of the things is, do we have to have the discussion about whether or not Cade Bell is going to be, an SEC coordinator next year, and Eli Holstein is going to be a quarterback? Do we have to have that now? Do we have to worry about that now? Pitt fans are so fatalistic about all of these things. They're already worried about their quarterback and their offensive coordinator getting stolen. I just don't get it. It makes no sense to me. Anyway, you look at Pitt and you basically say, I think Pitt, honestly, they should win this game. But SMU is going to be tough. Clemson's going to be tough. So I think we'll have a much better idea about Pitt in a few weeks than we do right now. I think they're good, though. I do think they're good, Adam. I think they're a good football team. And I think that, Holstein, he's got a lot of Brett Favre in him, doesn't he, though? Boy, he just he's like a gunslinger, likes to throw it around, doesn't really, care much about anything else in terms of like having fear of turning it over or whatever. He throws it around with the best of them.
Well, I just wanted to hop in, Paul. I mean, I think on the point of being worried about losing these guys, I think what we've lived through in the last 3 or 4 years is the way Pitt life is going to be in those kind of middle two conferences, right? The ACC and the Big 12 of, you might be really bad some years like Pitt was last year, but then you can make a couple of hires. There's so much movement. You are not kind of moribund like they were in so many of those years before Pat Narduzzi showed up. You have the ability to make a couple hires, get a couple of transfers, and put together a 6-0 team. So I think the floor for Pitt in some years, maybe next year you lose some of those guys, and the floor is lower. But maybe you use that year and you use the exposure of, if you get on College Game Day next week or something, you make some connections with recruits, and you have a chance to have a higher ceiling than I think they did for a long time. And I think that's the benefit of being kind of in that middle tier. And then now there's so much playoff access, you can at least get into the party and see what happens. So I wouldn't be fatalistic if I was a Pitt fan either. You might lose those guys for sure. And maybe next year is going to be tough. But if you have a good year this year and you can use it as a springboard for 2026, 2027, and you can make the right calls like Pat Narduzzi did this year, there's no reason to be fatalistic, because what you're really hoping to do is prove that, for a guy like Cade Bell, this is a place you can come and have success, prove yourself. It's not going to be a career death sentence to coach at Pitt because it's in, the Big 12 or the ACC. It can really be a stepping stone. You can get a lot of talented guys in here that maybe you weren't able to get, when Pitt was buried in the middle of the ACC and the Big East for so many years.
No, you're right. A final thought here before we wrap it up. To that end, Adam, they hired officially Al Green today. Not the Al Green, but Alan Green. I guess he was a deputy athletic director at Tennessee. I mean, there's so many titles for these guys that I think he was the deputy athletic director at Tennessee. He has experience. He was at Auburn as the actual athletic director, and he was at Buffalo as the actual athletic director. He has athletic experience. He was a really high-level baseball player at Notre Dame and, played 3 years in, I think, the Yankee organization. But if you listen to him today and you actually read about his background when when the news broke that they were hiring, Adam, what's the thing that jumps off the page? Football experience, NIL experience. Those are the two things that they hired this guy for. And today he actually said, and I'm paraphrasing here, so hopefully Dave doesn't jump down my throat here, but I'm paraphrasing when I say he basically said, you know what, the other sports, the Olympic sports, the non-revenue sports and all that, they're good for feel-good stories and they make you feel good, and but the reality is men's basketball and football, they drive the bus, and that's where we have to make sure that that's exactly why he was hired. I heard a number of different names that were thrown around, and the reality is every single one of them was thrown around for two reasons. One, they either had football experience or they were from a really football heavy school. And two, they were very good at or very well aware of how to make the NIL thing work. And I think that's why they hired this guy. That's why I said I don't ever believe in using the phrase home run hire, right? Because sometimes you hire, it's a home run hire, and it turns out to be a disaster. Doesn't work for whatever reason. But if you're asking me, did they check every box they needed to check? Yeah, they did. So let's see if it works now.
Yeah, and I always think about the Jordan Addison move and what a kind of like formative moment I think that was for a lot of Pitt fans, and they've done some good work, but it's time to carry that forward on that NIL front, and whatever with the House settlement, whatever the future of college football is going to be. You're right, Paul. The focus has got to be on football and basketball, and then the more revenue you bring in, the more success you can maybe have with the other sports. I think we saw that to some degree with Heather Lyke, but the reporting by our own Christopher Carter and Stephen Thompson was really good. If you haven't checked out that article on Post-Gazette.com, please do so. But the visions weren't quite aligned with Heather Lyke anymore, so I'll be curious to see how that comes together, and not like in the long term. I think a lot of times, traditionally, Paul, we talk about these hires as long-term things. Because of the way things are evolving, I think you're changing the culture really quick, and you're adapting much quicker to a rapidly changing environment. So we could see some really major changes in the next year.
There's no question. We'll just have to see, whether or not he gets the job. So this was a lot of fun, and we'll do it. I guess we're going to do more of these videos during the week. So, hopefully you can tune in and interact with us, and, we'll have a good time with it, I'm sure. I think that's it, right? I just basically sign off now. Is that how it goes, Adam?
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Oh, wait. Now I remember. Hang on. Something like this has to happen before I do this, and bear with me. Here we go. This, right?
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.